It started with what would Laura Roslin do, and now we're asking what would Sharon Raydor do. Welcome to the What Would Sharon Raydor Do podcast, where we talk with the woman that knows her best, Mary McDonnell, my mother, about Sharon's character, her thoughts, and her interactions with the team. My name is Olivia, and as I said, I'm Mary's daughter. I'm guesting, monitoring today's podcast. Very excited. This episode will be digging into the three-part mid-season finale, White Lies. So there may be some spoilers ahead. Okay, so let's just jump right in. Sharon seemed to take a bit of a back seat to the stories of some of the others this season, but finally, during this final arc, we saw her at the forefront, first by taking down Dwight Darnell, but also in the aftermath and her handling that. Was there a concern that her big moment might be tamped down by the immediate crisis of faith she experienced?
First of all, that's a great question, but before I answer it, I just want to say how excited I am, and I know you are, fans, that Miss Olivia is with us today.
Oh.
I know that you've all been keeping track of Olivia and her career, and I know that you're all very aware that one of the reasons she's with us today is she's in LA performing at Molly Malone's, and it is with all this original, beautiful new music. It's been so great, and we're so excited for this album to come out.
Thank you,
you,
Mom.
of course, will be the first to know because you all rock. That's for sure.
You really do.
Right?
You really do.
Liv, yeah.
Yes, thank you for all the support.
Yeah, so I'm really happy to have Liv guest today. Chelsea's here, of course, as well, always. And, and this question, was I concerned that Sharon's big moment would be overshadowed by her conflict, her emotional conflict during the arc? No, I was not at all concerned, and this is why. I think that one of the things that I absolutely loved about this arc was that the truth of it is that a big moment for a cop is not the moment when they shoot someone. You know, it's devastating to shoot that gun. You want to do it as little as possible. The trauma of the arc is that she's lost Chief Taylor. The thing that gets uncovered in Sharon during the process is that she has a moral dilemma that has to be addressed on a very deep spiritual level. So to me, there wasn't a big moment inherent in this. There was a reveal of what some cops go through. Not every cop can kill the bad guy and then say, "What's for dinner?" It costs them. People are different. They have different personalities. They have different spiritual journeys, so things affect them differently. But there are many cops actually I've talked to who really loved this dilemma because they completely related to sometimes it is impossible to resolve your job with your deepest beliefs. And that's, to me, was the big event. So that's how I experienced it. But that was a great question. Right, Liv? Does that make sense to you?
It absolutely does. Absolutely, 100%. And with everything that's going on in this country right now, we definitely are seeing both sides of the coin in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
It's really interesting.
That is true. I mean, I think that we are seeing that on such a massive level, and we have so little information as to what the cops are really experiencing. The cops who don't want to shoot, who've trained themselves so hard to untrain themselves of any bigoted response to general information. And we're all in the middle of having to find our way through that. So that's a really good point. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about the dichotomy of how Sharon can be very progressive and open in so many ways, like having a gay son and her role as a strong, independent woman and a woman in a man's world also, and how that exists with what appears now to be a strong adherence to religious law, as those things don't seem to necessarily overlap. So, like, for example, how religion would tell her that lying is bad, but she has to. So sometimes. So, how does she reconcile that?
Well, I think that was the question that was brought up in the episodes. And here's the only thing that I would question in terms of the words that. Who wrote this? Do we know? Oh, this was Mina. Mina, this is a great question. The only thing I would ask is if you could rephrase it without the word of religious law. Because there are people in the world who are deeply religious people who don't see it as laws or rules, who feel let's just talk about the Ten Commandments for a minute, which is repeated in other religions in different forms. There's a basic moral code that a spiritual practice supports. And the basic moral code, in the case of Sharon's religious practice, is Catholicism, is the Ten Commandments. That's reflected in other religions differently. It's not called the Ten Commandments. Not killing, taking another person's life is kind of a basic principle of a lot of religions. So the spiritual practice of someone is not obeying a law. A spiritual practice is making a decision to live your life according to a moral code and principles that require great consciousness. And what Sharon has understood as a Catholic has to do with these deep principles. She also, it's very possible to be a Catholic and have a gay son nowadays. These things are not in conflict anymore. Hello, people. There is a church in Santa Monica that has a tremendous gay and lesbian outreach, St. Monica's, and the priests are brilliant. There's an awful lot to be offered. The Catholic Church is fighting the good fight to emerge from some very shameful social experiences that have corrupted the church for a long time. But the principles of Catholicism, or the bottom line of Jesus, or the bottom line of Buddha, or the bottom line of Allah, there is a goodness and a very similar devotion to life being a sacred experience. So, okay, so that's one thing. Now, the other part of it is, so how does Sharon go out and lie to all these criminals when she's trying to get them to confess if she's not supposed to lie? And I think that that's an easier way to fudge. You can fudge around white lies to sort of bust the bad guy than when you come up against the bottom line, which is you just took someone's life and you took someone's son's life and you have to face the mother and the grief of that. And what is interesting is the imperfection of Sharon in these moments is that on the one hand, she can lie her face off if she's trying to bust someone in an interview or manipulate the law to a certain extent in their favor to get the bad people. But on the other hand, she's just done what other people would consider a heroic deed in response to the death of her dear friend and boss, and she feels horrible about the fact that she doesn't feel horrible because spiritually she should still feel horrible. That's a pretty imperfect human who's wrestling with the contradictions of life, and to me it only made her more human. Right?
I completely agree. And in some way, if I may, I feel like that's why a lot of people turn to religion, or why they make religion a practice, is the dealing with those combating things and those imperfections. Everyone has a sort of a moral code in some way, and we are always challenged with our imperfections and our flaws, as we're flawed as human beings, and religion can be someone's vehicle to deal with that.
Well, yes, and when you've made a choice to be a cop, think about what that really means. It means that you're devoting this particular lifetime to protecting others from bad things happening to them. And so you're putting yourself in between potential aggression and somebody else's life. So to a certain extent, you're devoted to saving lives. But the saving other people's lives costs you to go against certain individual principles. The same thing is true with presidents, world leaders. I will bring up Laura Roslin, who had to make some decisions as president that were completely against her emotional and spiritual personal beliefs. In those jobs, law enforcement, fire departments, politics, people do not have the luxury to just have their own principles. They are putting the well-being of society ahead of their own struggle. That's why having a familiarity with a priest to be able to even go in and reconcile it or try to, like someone would perhaps with a therapist or a coach or a friend or whoever you reconcile your darkest moments with, is so valuable, because nobody knows how to do this really.
Right. That's definitely true. Yeah, thank you for that, Mom. The next question, in terms of the power vacuum, the Sharon of a few years ago had a lot of desire to move up the ranks, but now that we're seeing this job having opened up, it's hard to envision Sharon wanting to leave Major Crimes now that she's established this great team and everyone works together so well. So what brought that change to Sharon in being more inclined to stay in Major Crimes than rise?
Well, I think that the question answers it. The question is put so
question.
well. It is the answer itself. Is that theoretically stepping into running Major Crimes after running, the FID, and then potentially becoming commander, potentially being in the running for what, chief of police? I don't know. How far did she want to go? Is logically the next step for any woman who's at the peak of her career, which she is. She has the wisdom, she has the experience and the understanding. In the meantime, she emotionally and professionally bonded with a group of people whose lives are on the line every day. And they've been doing fantastic work as a division. And she has been enlivened. She has found out that she's a better detective than she knew she was as she practiced more being a detective with her squad. She's beginning to understand the power of the position that she's in is directly connected to the people. And perhaps, I don't really know yet. We're just entering this tunnel. I don't know how she feels about it all yet. I just know that her initial response when the vacuum opened was, not me, not me. But she's grieving the loss of Taylor, too. This was her boss, who turned out to be a bit of a friend. So to suddenly say, I want his old job, is crass in Sharon's emotional makeup. I don't even think she's there yet. So honestly, the answer to this question is I'm not sure how she feels about it at all yet. That's the truth.
That's really interesting, and that's kind of actually perfectly segues into this next question. We saw a lot about how Dwight's death affected Sharon, but the question is about the death of Taylor. What about that death? He, like as you just said, he had sort of pivoted from being more of a foil to the team to being on their side. A lot like Sharon's own journey, going from IA into her captainship. And so how does seeing a fellow officer, and one she worked with a lot, die impact her? And how will that continue to affect her?
Well, I can only speak from having just shot it. I mean, really, we just shot it. You just saw it, but we shot it right before you saw it. And the first experience is actor character all at once. It's like we're learning that we're losing Robert from the show. And he is a dear friend and a delight to be on stage with, and so much fun at work, and always a gentleman, kind of a really great dude, and had been there for a very long time. So you have all those feelings in you about saying goodbye to your friend who's not going to be working with you every week. That's hard. Then I was in the scene. Sharon and Taylor were sitting there chatting in the courtroom. In those final moments, there was the... So to go back, so Sharon and Taylor were sitting together in the courtroom. They were sharing this event, and they were checking in with each other as to how Dwight's testimony could or could not impact what they were trying to get. And if you recall, they're still trying to understand who's funding all of this and wondering what they can get out of Dwight, or what. In the meantime, they're watching this person who, in the episode before, had done the Nazi salute and threatened them that way. So there's a lot they were sort of sharing energetically, and suddenly this guy is shooting up the courtroom. They jump together out of their seats and try to figure out, as do Flynn and Sykes right down the aisle, how to figure out, you have to be right there. And they both are. So the 1 minute you're drawing your guns together, knowing you have to handle this situation as a squad. And in the next, within seconds, in my right view, out of my right eye, I see the chief go down to the ground. All I know is I've got to stop this aggressor. That's all she knew. And she couldn't even look to see how badly he'd been hit. Maybe he just got hit in the arm. Maybe, you know what I mean? There was no awareness of Chief Taylor has just been, his life has ended. She couldn't even take time to do that. So there was this adrenaline horror that we all experienced. And then I experienced Sharon as in absolute shock for quite a while. Now that he's gone, and there's the beginning of processing the loss, and there, I'm sure, was a huge police funeral and all of those rituals that they go through. I think it does change them. I think they change every time they lose a fellow familiar cop in the field. I think it leaves a scar tissue. I think it makes decisions different. I think you realize, as we all do, our mortality. You either choose to continue to fight inside that kind of vulnerability, or I'm sure in some cases, a death like Chief Taylor may make somebody go, that's it, I'm done. I just lost my best friend, or whatever goes on. Losing comrades in the field, people have to respond to that somehow. We're seeing it all the time now. And I think Sharon is going to have to figure some things out. I don't think that was easy for her. Yeah, there's a sadness. How much time do you have to grieve as a cop? Not much.
Not much.
So we'll see.
Yes. Well, this has certainly been an emotional roller coaster, to say the least, for Sharon. And on that note, in the beginning, we see Andy trying to comfort her in the personal aftermath of the shooting. Mm-hmm. So how important is it to Sharon to have him there as part of her support system?
It's a miracle that she never expected and never had at the workplace before. Like, she never had a man around her in the workforce who was even aware of what she felt, let alone cared about it. I mean, honestly, let's talk about this. She was the head of IA, where everyone in IA is trained to not be connected. because you've got to be objective and you've got to police the police. So they went out together and had dinners, IA, and they were all friends and stuff, but there was no comrades in the field because they came in after the crime was over to see who screwed up. That's a different energy, right? So now, and also her problematic marriage, I do not get the impression, gave Sharon a lot of room for vulnerability. She had to keep the family together. She had to make the living. She had to go after the deadbeat dad. Jack turned out to be a very problematic human. She's not had this. She's not had a man next to her looking her in the eyes going, "You're not okay. What can I do for you?" She's used to independence and taking care of self. So this is like foreign matter. This is completely new for her. And I think there's a little bit of confusion in that for her at times. Because if you're used to taking care of yourself, you're also used to putting your feelings over to the side. But if somebody who cares about you deeply and has protector energy looks you in the eyes and says, "Are you okay?" your feelings come flying to the forefront, and things that you don't want anybody to know you feel start coming all over your face, and you start to maybe fall apart. And she can't do that. Or so she thinks. So it's confusing. It is a miraculous confusion. So far.
Very
That's
well
all I can
put.
say.
Miraculous
Well, it
confusion.
is kind of.
I'm going to steal that from you. I love that. Switching gears a little bit, we've seen a lot of push and pull between Sharon and Rusty in this season. Considering Sharon's very visceral reaction to Rusty's evidence, how hard was it for her to allow that evidence?
Sorry, kids. I have to turn Siri off. Hold on, everybody. Something. Siri just interrupted us about this question.
You know, you're supposed to put those things on silent, Mother.
Oh, okay. No, wait. Let me do the right thing here. We never turn it off, but Siri very rarely jumps in. I think she really likes
She's
that
picking
question.
up on my frequency.
She liked that question.
So anyway.
Okay. Yes.
So considering, you know, the Sharon's reaction to the evidence that Rusty had.
Yes.
How hard was it for her to allow it into Buzz's case?
Well, it wasn't hard in the moment because it was undeniably important evidence. And there was two things going on there. First of all, it was phenomenally important that she called Rusty on his shit. Oh, can I say it? Yes, it's a podcast. Because his self-directed ambition there has got to be, he is a very talented and brilliant young man, but the only thing that she can offer him, other than her just love, which she does, but directionally, because she didn't raise him, so she can't say, "Unless you young man, your mother," she can't do any of that. But she's got to point out his narcissism to him in his relationship. She has to do that. If she doesn't do that, she is robbing him of one of the most important things he needs, which is to begin to be aware of self and develop compassion. He's led such a hard life. So the narcissism and the survival mechanism in him is always at the forefront. And thank God for Gus. And there's people around Rusty right now who are slowly sort of turning him on to the fact that he's not seeing others. So that was a beautiful piece of writing on the part of James Duff, was to just let him get away with this. But the minute she had that done, this evidence was crucial to Buzz's case, and it wasn't at all hard for her to say, "Here we go." Because her care for Buzz and the resolution of this, Buzz has got to resolve this. He has to. It's clearly holding him back in his life. And he's about to do it. And Buzz is turning into a pretty good detective reserve officer person. He really is. And so her desire for Buzz's emotional and professional success here is also a driving force. So I think it was pretty easy to finish that and go to that.
Great. So we have a couple of questions from the world of Facebook.
Yay.
First is from Courtney. How do you handle the talk or criticism of elitism and arrogance that seems to go hand in hand with smart women, both personally and as characters?
Yeah, well, I think I developed an awareness of myself as having something at least somewhat valuable to say and do in the world as I grew as an actress. I did not necessarily grow up seeing myself as smart or elite or part of the, you know, Ivy League class of life or whatever, however you want to put that, because I think that's what, we do. We pigeonhole people. And so I grew out of not being part of that and into a person that has very strong opinions and ideas, and I'm perfectly willing to share them. And they're either welcomed or they're rejected because I'm just being too much of a know-it-all. I think women who speak their minds and who aren't afraid to stand up in their own shoes and say what they think and do what they want are still frightening to the population at large. We are still not used to women being outspoken, smart, and incredible problem solvers and warriors. We are still threatened by it as a culture. All you have to do is take a look at this election, and it's been made perfectly clear to us that we are not all moving forward together.
The double standards are very evident.
The double
yes.
standards. So how do I deal with the double standards when they come or when I see them? First of all, I expect them. I say this over and over to people. Why are you surprised? Did you think that there would not be a backlash to the potential first female president of the United States? Did you actually think that was just going to happen? No. It is a deeply threatening principle to a great deal of people who haven't really yet thought about it, who haven't embraced the feminine as power, who don't understand the equality of that, who have seen life in a different way, and it just hasn't been there for them yet. So I'm not surprised by it. I kind of expect it. And when you are in that space of allowance for different opinions, different levels of evolving people, different parts of the country, because people grow up differently in different parts of the country. Maybe allow for all of that. As you enter these situations, you're not quite as thrown by the criticism when it comes at you online or on Twitter or whatever. I have a harder time watching it happen to others than I do experiencing it myself. And then I remind myself that those other women are also prepared for it.
Yes, I was going to say, I think that's probably what other women experience as well.
That's right.
And so if we're all just not worried about ourselves, then it's sort of how the problem gets perpetuated, because we're not recognizing, we're being so resilient within ourselves and saying, I can deal with this.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the other person.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
So now it's kind of like I see more and more collective. Like just last night I spent a lot of time, hours in front of the TV watching the Charlotte, North Carolina tragic situation unfold. And there were so many, I was watching MSNBC, which is my want, and there were so many good ideas, so many very good speakers, so many intelligent people. And so quite a few of those were women. And I remember thinking about halfway through that had this tragedy happened 10 years ago even, we wouldn't have had any women coming on the news to talk about their perspective on it. they wouldn't have been experts in it. And I just had a moment of going, this is very good. We are truly growing as a nation. And it takes a horrible moment like last night, perhaps, for us to be able to see where we are and where we're not and where we have to go. But there was a collective response last night among the men and women that I was watching that was completely joined together. There was no gender struggle. It was smart people who care about this country and who care about this thing that keeps happening between law enforcement and black men, particularly, and who are brokenhearted about it, men and women standing together. And there was something quite moving about our potential there.
Yes, definitely. That's a great question, Courtney. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very poignant for what's
Yeah.
going on right now. Our next question is from Allie. Do you, as an actress, find it easier to know the outcome of the story or case, or do you enjoy not knowing until the end of the episode arc?
I love not knowing till the end of the episode arc because it just makes your work smarter. You know, it's very hard to realistically act all the nuance that would be truthful in life when you solve a crime in 42 minutes. It's very hard to find the true experience. But when you can't solve a crime for 5 episodes or 3 episodes, some of that nuance you get to explore as a performer. So I love the continuing story. I love it.
I think I would too.
Yeah, I think you would. I know you would.
Yeah, right. Our next question is from Kate. Thank you, Allie, for that question. Kate asks, how did you, Mary, feel about Sharon's initial difficulty to feel bad about killing Dwight Darnell?
Oh, it made 100% sense to me. When I read it, I remember at the read-through, we all do this read-through, and for the first time I read it alone, but then went quickly into the first read-through of it. I was sitting next to James Duff, and when I said that one line, the problem, to Provenza, the problem is that I just took another person's life, and I don't feel anything. Like, I remember saying, when I said that line, it felt to me like this is the woman that I sense Sharon Raydor is. The complexity of that. She has a spiritual and philosophical, she puts her finger right on the problem of becoming immune to death, of becoming, in law enforcement, unfeeling, unthinking, in order to facilitate the job. And that's not a human, that departs you somehow from your humanity. And I have so much respect for law enforcement. I don't know how they do this. So to me, it was sort of very exciting to explore that idea instead of the heroism in the action she had to take, which there was also. I mean, she stopped the guy. That's her job. She did her job, and that was great. But to feel that kind of disconnected, borderline hatred, I don't think is a comfortable human experience. And that's what happens when we are confronted with hatred and bigotry and racism, which she was by this very same young man, is we either don't deal with it at all if we're allowed to get out and away from it, or if we have to confront it. There is a real danger in losing our own humanity in the fight. And you do not want to become the monster that you're in opposition to, but you can very easily. And so that was so brilliant. I thought it was a brilliant idea that James wrote to kind of
Have her
tackle.
struggle with,
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. Yes, thank you, Kate, for that question. And Mom, thank you very much. And thank you for letting me
Olivia.
moderate your podcast. This
Oh,
is
I
fun.
loved having you here. You're good at this, actually. You should have a little talk show.
Yes, have a radio voice.
Yeah, you can come podcast anytime.
Yes. Well, that about wraps it up. Mom, thank you again, and thank you all for listening. And Mom, you want to sign us out?
I do. It's been a pleasure to have Olivia here, and we'll do it again. Just keep coming to LA and performing. I know.
Deal.
All right. So listen, all of you. This is going to be. It's going to be a while before we meet again in the What Would Sharon Raydor Do podcast. As you know, we're on hiatus, and we will resume the podcast once this show starts to air again. So it's going to be a while before we talk like this. I just want to say to all of you that you've made this podcast, which was this Chelsea and Mary idea that we just kind of had this feeling about, and we just dove into it, and you all have just made this a reality that we now don't want to do without. So we're really, really grateful. Your questions are great. I can't wait to come back and start a whole new season of experiences. James has got a lot up his sleeve, as you heard in the Facebook chat. Cameron Manheim's joining us. Apparently she's going to give us a really hard time. And a bunch of us are going to be competing for the power vacuum. So, boy, we're going to have a lot to talk about. I hope you all have a wonderful autumn. We're facing autumn. And keep being who you are and keep devoting yourselves to all the causes that I see you constantly supporting online, and all the questions you keep asking. You're just remarkable. So, this podcast has been brought to you in part by MajorCrimesTV.net.